Alright, hello. I'm going to remake this video because I messed up some of the editing, so I feel like I can make it a little better. This is for installing Ubuntu on Virtualbox. So hopefully you've downloaded Virtualbox and you've installed it. If you're having trouble getting Virtualbox to start, one thing you can try is right-clicking and saying Run as Administrator. This fixes a lot of issues usually. The other thing is boot up your computer, go to your BIOS, and make sure you have virtualization installed. The other thing you will need for this tutorial will be to have downloaded the Ubuntu Iso from the Canvas website. Hopefully I have the link there for that. And this is going to be like the CD, so to speak, that we're going to use to install our operating system. So what a virtual machine does is it's going to make a software to hold your computer. So the computer thinks it's running on its own hardware, its own disk space, its own network, but realistically it's running on another system. It's a virtual computer per se, virtual hardware. So I've already done this once. I'm going to actually make a new one from scratch. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say new. We can type in our Linux server name. Be careful of having spaces. We don't want to have spaces in here. Again, we want to have Linux. Pardon me. We want to have Linux and a 64-bit. Next, this is going to specify how much memory we're going to be using to the virtual machine. This should be adequate for a server. If you were using, say, a desktop version, you would want more, but for a server, this should be fine. For the hard disk, instead of copying over your hard disk, or instead of doing like a dual boot where you have to partition your hard drive, what we're going to do is we're going to create a file that's going to act as a hard disk. So let's create a virtual disk now. We can select any format we want. I'll just use VDI. And we're going to do dynamically allocated. And 8 GB should be ample. But here, what we want to do is we're going to specify where we want to put this file. So click the folder, and now we have to specify where we want to put the hard drive folder. So I have down here in the E drive, I've created a folder for all my Virtualbox virtual machines, and I created a Linux, intro to Unix. So here I'm gonna make a new file. We're gonna call it Ubuntu Server try2. I hit create, and then essentially I'm done. Now I have to load the CD. So just like a normal computer, if I had to put the CD in the tray to boot from it, here I have to do the same thing. We click on our server, we go to settings, and down here at storage, we can specify, or we can add a CD. So add optical drive. So we'll say choose disk. And again, this is going to be the ISO file that we downloaded, which mine's in a download file. So once that's there, what I have virtually done is the same thing that I would physically do if I put a CD in a computer. So hit OK, and now we can start it. But once you start it, you're going to see this screen. This is going to ask you what language to use. So right now we can go click on English, and we'll just hit enter, and we'll just say install Ubuntu Server. Notice right down here you have several different icons. This icon here represents networking. What's going to happen is it's going to try to use your computer as a NAT or a router per se to connect to your actual network connection. If for some reason this doesn't work, you can also in the settings set this to bridge. That can sometimes fix the issue, but it should work out of the box the way it is normally. Now here it's going to ask for, again, our language. So we'll say English, United States. I do not want to detect a keyboard. We'll just say English US, unless you have a special keyboard layout. And then it's going to start loading up. This should go fairly quickly. Keep in mind this is the server, so it's a lot less information than, say, the desktop version would have. Again, here it's configuring the network. If your network's already connected to your host machine, it should be fine. Here I will provide the name for my computer. So we can name it something. This will be the prompt that you see on the command line. So here we'll say it Unix try2. I hit enter. Now it's going to ask your a username. This is the thing you're going to log in with. This part you want to make sure you do not forget. This is going to be your only way to get root privilege, which we'll talk about later. So you cannot forget this. So I'm going to use a standard old convention of first initial, last name, and then I select a password. Again, this password you do not want to forget. Since this is just a simple test server that we're going to be practicing with, it doesn't have to be very strong. I'm going to use actually a very weak password, but once I type that in, it's going to ask me to type it in just to make sure I got it right, and then I'm going to hit continue. Yeah, so here it's going to say it's a weak password. Yes, go ahead. I will use the weak password, but keep in mind that normally I would not want to do this. I don't really care about encryption right now. And then right now it'll set up the clock and then install the system. Set the time zone. Yours should actually be East Coast. For here, we're just saying guided use entire disk. We don't have to worry about destroying your own hard drive because once again, this computer thinks its hard drive is that 8 GB file you created, the VDI file. So we'll just say guided use entire disk. And so again, it's going to have 8.6 GB. That's how you know it's not actually erasing your hard drive. It's just using that file you created. And here, just go ahead and say yes. We'll talk about what swap and what some of the other things that are happening here, but for now, this should be adequate. Here, if you need to set up a proxy, you can. You shouldn't have to do a proxy, so just go ahead and hit continue. Once again, this is assuming you are connected to the network. What's going to happen is it's going to go out and look for files to download to finish installing the system. Right now, it's configuring a program called apt, which we'll use to install different programs throughout the semester. Right now, we can just say no automatic updates. Generally, updates are advised, but for this case, since it's basically a sandbox to practice with, we don't have to worry about automatic updates. Here, it's very important that we simply only have this selected. We don't have anything else. We do not need a manual package selection. We don't need DNS, LAMP, or mail server. We may install these manually later on if we have time in the semester. Don't need Samba. We don't need virtual machine host, and we don't need open. Oh, you know what? You can install the open SSH server if you want. So yeah, you can install that one. That one might be useful. This will allow you to SSH into your laptop. Sometimes your laptop won't allow the connection to go to the Virtualbox, so this can be a little tricky. But this, in theory, you should be able to SSH into your Linux server. So hit enter and just let it, now it retrieves all the files and installs the system. So here, it's going to try to install Grub. Once again, this is not going to interfere with your system since you're using a virtual computer instead of a dual boot. If you were installing a dual boot, at this point you have to be a little bit careful because Windows and Grub do not always get along, so you have to do a little bit of research. I believe it will still run with Windows 10, but you might want to do a little research for booting up. What's going to happen if you did do a dual boot, you would have the option when you first start your computer if you want Windows or Linux. But since this is just a virtual machine, we'll just say yes and not worry about that, and then let it finish. At this point, the installation is complete. It will actually boot the CD for you, so you don't have to worry about taking it out. So we can just hit continue and let it restart. And once it restarts, we can run the Virtualbox and log in, and we'll have access to our new system. Here's the boot menu. It'll automatically go to Ubuntu Server. And once we log in, we'll see that we have, it'll ask us to log in. This is where we enter that username and password that we created. This is where you really don't want to forget it. And here we're logged in. And now this is our server. This is a command prompt. This is how we'll send commands to the operating system. We'll do everything through this command prompt this semester, with the exception of possibly at the very end we may install a very lightweight GUI system, but not right now. Anyway, that will conclude this video. Hopefully this audio won't be messed up on this one. I will see you soon. Later.